Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Anna, and on behalf of all of us at Force Space, thank you for joining us on Facebook and Zoom today for the second episode in a six-part lunchtime series of presentations and conversations focused on questions of sustainability across disciplines. We will continue the conversation tomorrow, July 16th, with a focus on invasive species, climate change, and biodiversity. So come back for that. And again, next week, July 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, check out the full schedule on our website, concordia.ca/4, the number 4. But for now, if you're joining us on Zoom, welcome. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A function of Zoom throughout, and our moderator, Dr. Rebecca Titler, will address them after the presentation today. And for those of you following along on our Facebook page, we welcome your comments and questions, and we'll be sure to get them to the presenter here today. It is now my pleasure to invite Amy Potit to provide a brief introduction of today's event and introduce today's presenter, Cédric Yargaud. Over to you, Amy.
Hello. So I'm Amy Potit. I'm the co-director of the Loyola Sustainability Research Center. We're very pleased to be working with Fourth Space with this webinar series. The webinar series is an outgrowth of our planned Sustainability Across Disciplines conference that had been scheduled for 16 through 18 March, just days after everything shut down for the pandemic. So we have been very fortunate to be able to put together this short webinar series to allow some of the participants to present their work to you in this format. So thank you, Anna, for working with us, and thank you all for participating in our series. Again, the speaker is Cédric Yargaud, and his presentation is on privately owned public space. I'm going to allow now Norma Rantisi to give you a more comprehensive introduction of the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm currently a professor in the Department of Geography, Planning and Environment at Concordia, and was an honors thesis supervisor for Cédric. And so just wanted to give a brief introduction. Cédric Yargaud is a recent alumni from the Department of Geography, Planning and Environment. He graduated with an honors in urban planning degree this past spring. And during the past year, he worked on completing the honors research project, which he will present today. Throughout his undergraduate degree, Cédric has grown quite fond of the question of the influence and impact of capital and speculation on the urban built form, as well as the consequences of this for the quality of life for metropolitan residents. He's passionate about urban public space, and it's this very passion that that inspired his choice of topic for his research. In the fall, Cédric will be taking on new challenges as he'll begin a master's degree in urban planning at Université de Montreal. So we're excited about that as well. And I will now pass it over to Cédric. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to have you all to see my presentation today. So I'd like to start off today's talk with a quick anecdote. So I have a 9-year-old daughter who absolutely loves to play. I mean, if eating and sleeping were not necessary in life, she'd play day and night with no reason to stop. Most importantly though, she loves to play outside at the park, whether it be at playground or an open green space to run around in. Rain or shine, all types are acceptable if it means playing. And when we think about it, don't we all, adults included, love to spend time outside in quality spaces? Of course, as an adult, few of us are going to run around the park flying a kite, but nonetheless, we need quality open spaces to enjoy the sunshine and decompress. As one of my interview participants said to me when asked the important question of what public space's role is in the city, the interviewee said that they provide opportunities for gathering, relaxation, even isolation if needed. They're environments where you can go to rest, relax, you can meet lots of people, and talk and play. Public spaces stimulate life in the city. Now, as we move forward, I ask you to keep this in mind and reflect on how you feel when you find yourself in a beautiful public space. So this brings me to the main subject of this project. So as our cities grow larger and denser, stimulating further growth while maintaining a certain quality of life grows more complex. The speculation occurring in our cities leaves scarce vacant lots increasing in value, often in the tens of millions of dollars. This reality poses a particular push and pull dynamic between the opposing desires of developers to build higher and bulkier to remain profitable, while the citizens request more parks and quality public spaces in the city. One proposed solution to remedy this dilemma has been the negotiation between private developers and city officials for the provision of privately owned public spaces, also known as the acronym POPs. So in exchange of development incentives, which generally equates to profitable outcomes for both sides. So for this research project, the aim was to find out if the existing urban planning mechanisms in Montreal are ensuring the private provision of quality public amenities for the population, such as green spaces or plazas in the downtown borough known as Ville-Marie. So to answer this, I guided my research with these three questions. I must admit, my initial impression was that Montreal wasn't doing a very good job at providing public spaces, nor was it requiring private developers to do anything about it. But in a few moments, I'll present some examples that changed my outlook on Montreal's recent developments. But first, a brief history lesson on POPs and urban planning legislation in Montreal. So to better understand the phenomenon in Montreal, it was important to understand what POPs consists of and from which context it emerged. So privately owned public spaces made their debut in New York City in the 1960s when the city completely rewrote its comprehensive zoning ordinance. This included a new tool called incentive zoning. So from a desire to control real estate development and to keep the city livable, this policy enabled the city and the private sector to negotiate for there to be public spaces integrated into private development projects. Over the decades, there have been more than 500 POPs projects built using this policy across Manhattan. Its success had led many large metropolitan cities around the world to begin considering similar policies for their city. Many resulting spaces have been deemed a great success, including 590 Madison Avenue, 1 Liberty Plaza, and one of my absolute favorites is Paley Park. So what about Montreal? So the situation is quite different in Montreal since we don't have a policy explicitly designed for POPs to emerge out of incentive zoning, not even an adaptation of it. In fact, the laws that govern planning in Montreal don't allow the city to incentivize developers. Yet we can find spaces that appear to be public and happen to be privately owned. So the structures that govern urban development in Quebec have gradually evolved since the Canadian Confederation back in 1867. And in 1979, the Quebec government finally created a consolidated land use planning law that would govern its full territory. This national policy, the Act Respecting Land Use and Development, basically outlined the ground rules for cities to use when planning their territory. Montreal is one of the unique few in the province that has reached a significant size and with local urban challenges which warranted special provisions to address its needs. In 2001, the Quebec government gave the status of metropolitan to the city of Montreal, a status which also came with the significant modification and revision of a unique chapter in the law, so the Montreal Charter. This is where Montreal gets most of its powers. It's also where I found some of the tools that Montreal can use to make sure the development firms are held accountable, tools I will discuss in a moment. So to find the answers to my questions, I used various methods to cover the multiple facets of this topic. Of course, the largest part of this research involved reading through land use planning laws, the Montreal Charter, numerous municipal bylaws, and development agreements. I found most up-to-date documents from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and the city's website. So for the development agreements of specific projects, I used Montreal's interactive open data tool called Ma Carte Interactive, which allows residents to access a plethora of information about municipal affairs, including zoning regulation. So the second method was semi-structured interviews conducted with professionals and planners, all of which were either related to a specific project or had some experience working with these types of negotiations. And lastly, I conducted site observations at 5 locations. These projects, either built or under construction, contain public spaces within their development plan. So the 5 sites that I visited were the Montreal World Trade Center, located near Square Victoria Metro, which was built in 1990. The project included the purchase of a historical alleyway, La Ruelle de la Fortification, where the historical city's fortification wall once stood, and its transformation into a year-round atrium-covered pedestrian boardwalk with a stunning water fountain, shops, and a practical connection to the metro station. Next, I learned about Brivia Group's restoration of the 19th century former home of Louis Hippolyte Lafontaine near Lucien Lally metro station during a summer internship at the development firm in the summer of 2019. So while the project does not directly include a public green space, and it is entirely privately owned, with the full restoration of the 19th century glory, it does, however, make a contribution to Montreal's architectural heritage for the public. 21 Arrondissement is a project by Prével. It includes a European-style public square that is surrounded by cafes, food, shops. It offers a wonderful seating area in the summer for residents, but also for nearby neighborhoods and passersby. So I argue that this is one of the most noteworthy projects I visited and is among the best examples of what can be achieved when we use one of these planning tools. Next, we have Broccolini's site of Victoria on the Square and its neighboring construction of the new National Bank headquarters, both of which are still under construction, but they will include, once completed, a 40-meter wide linear park that will connect Saint-Jacques and Notre-Dame Street. In addition to the provision of this public space, the agreement with the city includes a requirement that the developer must forego a perpetual servitude to the city, so a right to public access basically forever. And lastly, there's DeVimco's redevelopment of the Montreal Children's Hospital site near Cabot Square. This is a project that went through significant public debate and consultation, which I'll briefly mention does not quite hold up to the public's desire, but will nonetheless include a sizable amount of green space on site, in addition to the redevelopment and expansion of Place Henri Durand Park on the corner of Tupper and Sussex Streets. So in terms of the tools, during the course of this project, while I discovered that Montreal doesn't have explicit power to incentivize developers, it does, however, have tools to hold them accountable for public good within their projects. So the first of these tools has to do with discretionary powers. So these elements in the law allowed the city to create a bylaw pertaining to specific construction, alteration, or occupancy proposals for immovables. Now, that's commonly referred to by its French acronym, which is the PP, c'est moi. This tool essentially enables municipal councils to review residential development projects that slightly differ from the zoning bylaw. So the fact that they differ is what allows the city to make requests and suggestions before authorizing the project. Also, its flexibility allows the city to adapt to complex urban realities without needing to rewrite the whole zoning bylaw each time. So this is one of the most powerful tools in the city's pocket, which allows it to make demands in the development project and influence the outcome, but only if the project deviates from the zoning plan. So if it is as of right, which means in conformity, then this bylaw unfortunately cannot be applied. The second tool I identified is one which applies to all residential projects, whether as of right or not. What is commonly referred to as the park tax allows the City of Montreal to require the owner of an immovable to make a maximum contribution of 10% of the area or of the value of the site in the form of land or money. Most importantly, the city has the power to choose if the project must contribute 10% land or a financial contribution. So this begs the question, is the city ready to fully use this tool to ensure the inclusion of green spaces in all urban residential projects downtown? And lastly, this third tool is very new and has not officially been used yet. So the right to first refusal made possible by a new law in 2017 that added many powers in the Montreal Charter. It gives the city the right to purchase a given site if it comes available on the market before anyone else. For this to work, the city had to create a bylaw in which it would identify the areas subject to this law. So these areas can be seen here. Notice the site located where the metro lines intersect at Berry-UQAM, next to the Jacques Cartier Bridge. This site contains the Molson Brewery's soon-to-be former site once they move their operations to the South Shore. So there's been a lot of back and forth discussion about the sale of this property, and it's only recently that an agreement was concluded between the City of Montreal, Molson, and the consortium of buyers composed of Groupe Montoni, Groupe Sélection, in partnership with the Fonds Immobilier de Solidarité, along with the SHDM, for the future development of this large site. So the city could have bought the entire site for itself as per the bylaw at the agreed upon terms, but rather opted for reaching agreement that would be favorable for all involved parties. So the bylaw appears to have worked efficiently as a scare tactic to get developers around the negotiation table. In fact, I expect that as the availability of vacant lots dwindles in the city, developers might be more inclined to further negotiate with the city to get ambitious projects approved. Thus, in this case, the proposed project will involve relinquishing some parts of the site to the municipality, which will be used to accommodate a new school, a community center, a large park, a river promenade, and a social housing agreement with the SHDM. This recent mechanism, I would argue, now gives the city the upper hand in getting what it needs and wants, at least in these areas, since all the city has to do is hint reasonable interest in taking over the site to prompt a developer to engage in a negotiation. This is especially the case for prime river locations like these. Therefore, this tool could surely strengthen the city's leverage in securing some degree of private provision of public amenities within future projects. So through this triangulation of methods, I was able to come to some conclusions. So historically, Montreal's case-by-case assessment of projects has fallen short on capitalizing on the potential to hold developers accountable for the provision of public amenities within their developments. However, I've also revealed that in the past decade or so, major changes in urban governance have led to the shift in development outcomes, that is to say, projects that have included more public amenities like green spaces within them. Lastly, I believe that the long-term evolution of these tools and the emergence of recent ones has laid the foundation for the city to fundamentally shape and influence projects so that they improve the overall quality of the built form for a more sustainable future. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Cedric. That was really interesting. Do we have any questions right away from the audience? Hang on, give it a minute. Does anybody on the panel have a question to start us off? No? Okay, well, I have a question then. sometimes it takes a little bit to get questions moving, and I always have questions. So my question is maybe slightly tangential, but I noticed in all your pictures of these pops that most, if not all of them, seem to be paved. So that there's an impervious surface there. Is this coincidence? Is it easier to maintain? And as a side question, perhaps can, within the system in Montreal, could the city require or push for more actual impervious surfaces rather than just trees in pots? Or do we see this as kind of where the compromise happens?
Mm-hmm. Definitely like a good observation. And this is what happens in a lot of metropolitan cities, right? Where these public spaces, often what happens is the developer kind of wants to save as much money as possible, because if the public space is required, it comes out of their budget per se, and it increases their prices. So I think that in Montreal's case, there's significant potential to improve the choice of materials that is used in these public spaces, that rather it be only concrete, that it can be more of a permeable a material that can allow kind of rainwater to percolate. And in the PPC-moi bylaw, there are some elements where the city can require more, choice of more sustainable materials in there. It just doesn't explicitly say what materials to choose. So for sure, just the requirement that there be a public space, I think for the moment might be a lot to ask for developers. But as we move forward, I think that it'll become just de facto, you build a project, there's a public space, and then we can start asking for a lot more requirements in there.
Thank you. I have another question if nobody else has any. Yep, Amy, go right ahead. You just have to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Cedric, for the talk. It's interesting for me in part because I'm working right now on a project related to the Chandelier in the Plateau area. And there's some condo developments to the south of it where they have decided to develop a green alley between, so they've got, every time the city's allowing a condo development to go on, they're requiring that some land be ceded to the city for a green alley, and they're also requiring that the configurations have some green space in them, although I would say they're not public at all. They have fences lining them, those spaces. But that example is one where there was a long-standing plan that goes back to the early 2000s to build some sort of alley. And so they've been gradually working on getting it in. What you were focused on in your presentation were the rules that allow, the tools that allow the city to get these sorts of spaces during the planning process. What I didn't hear you talking about, and I did blink out for a few minutes in the middle if something happened to my connection, I'm not sure, so maybe I missed it, but I don't think you, from the slide that was still there, I don't think so. Did you look much at the urban planning to see, like the planning documents for the city, to see if how green space is figuring in the priorities, or public spaces more generally in the priorities? And also, I'm wondering if that has changed as we've seen different city governments or different arrondissement governments come and go.
I did look a little bit at the Plan de développement des espaces verts in Montreal. It will probably be in revision pretty soon, so their orientations are going to change and whatnot. But the focus of the research was mostly in Ville-Marie borough, which is why I didn't branch out too much across the island. If I were to kind of continue, I would look at different boroughs as well as how these things interact. But I looked at kind of the national planning law to see what is allowed by the municipalities, and then also like what are those specific tools that can work with private developers to build these. So in the case of Chandelier, I'm a bit familiar with it. If there were a developer that wanted to purchase the lot because it's not necessarily zoned residential, they would have to derogate from the urban plan of that borough, and that would be an opportunity for that particular borough to request a significant amount of things. The other option is if the borough themselves want to take that upon themselves to work on that particular space, right? And that can be part of their orientations.
Just to clarify, so far as I know, the Champ de Passile itself it's been designated for some years now as a park-like space or protected space. I don't think there's any plans to change that. I have not heard discussion of changing it. But there is an area from the southern border of it to McGuire where they are, there have been, I guess, two or three condo developments or housing developments since the early 2000s, and now there's another one that's in the works right now. So that's what I was talking about. I wasn't talking about change, so, but there's still it does involve changes in zoning. You're right, because those were zoned for industrial use. So now they're going to residential.
Okay, it looks like we've lost Amy for the moment.
I just wanted to clarify, it's disappearing.
Sorry.
So far as I know, there's no
Amy, I think we lost you there for a minute.
Okay, well, I was just wanting to reassuring that he's worried about the future of the Champ de Passy, that so far as I know, there's no threat to it remaining a park-like area.
Good to know.
Okay, so, yeah, my internet today is acting up, sorry.
That's quite all right. We have a question from the audience asking, in light of COVID-19, we've seen cities take initiative to implement wider walking pathways and more bike lanes, some to become permanent changes. Do you see this logic being replicated to a renewed importance in the role of public spaces in the COVID-19 age?
Yeah, I definitely think that, the situation that we're living as a society now will and has to have a major impact on the way that we plan cities. And my hope is that a lot of these initiatives that we're seeing, in major metropolitan cities can serve as an example of what we can do when we kind of reappropriate the city. So I think that, what we're learning now needs to be taken and built on for the future of our cities, and offering more possibilities for, cities to be built for individuals rather than, profit and automobiles and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. So here's the question from Lena. Are there any plans to bring natural settings back into urban planning? Example, permaculture, self-sustainable gardens, fruit trees, etc.
Okay, I'm now.
There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of community initiatives kind of to build that. I'm not particularly well versed in urban agriculture as much as I was a few years ago, but there's a lot of initiatives in terms of the city's plan. I think that they are gradually requiring more vegetation to be included in public spaces. So the 40-meter wide green space that will be where the National Bank's headquarters is, it has to be vegetated. So it's going to be grassy. It's going to be, more of a natural vegetative setting rather than only, just this placette concrete. So I definitely think that cities are, like Montreal particularly, is moving towards this trend of having more of a green thumb in their developments and in their projects that they build.
Thank you. Lena, does that answer your question? Okay, it seems to. I don't have any more questions in the chat for the moment, unless somebody has a final question that they want to ask. No, I have a final question then. And a lot of your presentation seems to focus on the residential building projects. And I'm wondering if the same kinds of issues would apply to industrial building projects, or whether there's a focus on POPs for residential projects for any reason, for example, that there are more people there or something like that, or is it just, again, coincidence that some of the tools are better adapted to residential projects?
Yeah, for sure. So the PPC Moi is a primary tool that is used for residential development projects. The park tax as well is geared towards residential projects. So most of the projects going up in Montreal are, condo towers with maybe a little bit of mixed use. I think that some of these tools could be adapted and used for commercial real estate, such as the case in New York, where it applies to commercial, office buildings as much as it does to condo towers for the incentive zoning, right? For industrial, I'm not exactly sure how they could adapt it to it, but I'm sure that they could make a variant of, the bylaw if we wanted to bring back some small industries into the city, or if, some industries wanted to expand their operations in the city, there could probably be some bylaws that would require public spaces or something. But it would definitely have to be built on and created for that specific purpose.
Thank you, Cedric. So we're right at 12:30, so we're out of time. I would invite you, if you have more questions for Cedric, you can probably reach him through email, and if you can't reach him through email, you can reach me, and I will forward any questions that you have. Please don't forget that tomorrow we have another one of these half-an-hour webinar sessions where we will have Isaac Eckert, who's a student in the biology department, who will be talking about invasive species, climate change, and biodiversity. So that should be, again, quite a different topic, but a fascinating one as well. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the ForSpace for helping us host this, the Loyola Sustainability Research Center and the Loyola College for Diversity and Sustainability. All of you for participating, Norma for participating and supporting your student, and most of all, Cedric, for your great work and for your presentation today. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it along to Anna from the ForSpace.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thanks again, Cedric, for sharing your research. On behalf of all of us at ForSpace, I'd like to thank you for being here, Cedric, Norma, Amy, and especially Dr. Rebecca Titler for moderating today's event. We did annoyingly have a few little technical issues along the way, including the Facebook live stream. So I just wanted to make it known to everyone that we will repost the entire video on Facebook as soon as possible, as the live stream only started working halfway through. So bear with us, it'll be there. The full video of today's presentation will also be available on our website, which is concordia.ca/4 very soon. So look out for that. And we look forward to seeing you again on this virtual channel tomorrow at noon. On that note, thank you very much, everyone. We appreciate your participation, and à demain. Thanks.